Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. With education moving from in-person to online, we're learning Vermont is a boundless resource for kids of all ages. Zoom a Scientist is an interactive webinar featuring scientists and researchers from UVM, SUNY Plattsburgh, and other partners of Lake Champlain Sea Grant. Think of it as a way to surf even when you can't get on the water. Our Keith Silva talked with Ashley Eaton, who is the Watershed and Lake Education Coordinator for the Lake Champlain Sea Grant.
Zoom a Scientist is a virtual learning series that the University of Vermont Extension and Lake Champlain Sea Grant is hosting with feature scientists from UVM, SUNY Plattsburgh, and our partner organizations. The sessions are really focused on watershed science, covering topics such as oil spills, climate change, food web dynamics and fisheries, to kind of still provide some of the base level environmental science and watershed science education that Lake Champlain Sea Grant is focused on.
Who can participate in these sessions?
So initially the sessions were geared towards students, but then we realized that just broadly folks were super interested. So we really geared the sessions toward anyone that wants to participate. There's some components that are really great for supporting at-home learning for students, but also the topics are pretty interesting to anyone, I think, that's curious about the Lake Champlain Basin. The sessions are free. We only require folks to register online, and we can share the link. It's go.uvm.edu/seagrant-live. And so if you go online and register, you'll get an email that will follow up. It'll have the link. You'll join by Zoom. And the sessions are also being recorded. So for folks that can't make the timing of the sessions, they can always watch later. And just a little disclaimer, we're realizing that some school districts can't join via Zoom. And so if that's an issue, we're actually hoping to launch YouTube Live this week for these sessions. So if teachers want to reach out and contact us, we're happy to provide the YouTube Live link as well.
Is there an interactive element to these presentations?
Yeah, so our education really wanted to kind of cultivate a pretty engaging learning environment. And so one thing we're doing through Zoom is the webinar features we're able to have on polling. So we're checking in, hearing what folks are learning. We have an ongoing Q&A box. So for questions that folks have for presentation, and something that's been really awesome is that the presenter is speaking, but our team is behind the scenes, and we're actually chatting with folks live, answering these questions that are kind of, relevant to understanding the rest of the presentation. And then at the end, we're able to field some of those bigger kind of in-depth questions to the researcher that we're featuring that day. We are covering topics on climate change, topics on technology. We're covering environmental drone mapping, so actually mapping streams drones. We're having a session on environmental law and understanding water resource law, so that will be really interesting. And we've got a couple sessions on fisheries, looking at a few different projects that are happening, one on lake trout, one on food web dynamics and mysis. So that should be really fascinating.
Ashley, what's the goal here?
Yeah, well, I think we've got a couple of goals. One, is our mission at Sea Grant really to provide education to folks in the community. And I don't think there's, a better time than when folks are just needing to engage with the natural world, to feel more connected to play at a time where it does feel a little isolating. And so I think for us, we want to just bring people together, talk about topics that are, really important to this place that we live in, hopefully provide a little bit of connectivity during this time.
To Zoom a Scientist, visit go.uvm.seagrant-live. Special needs and disability accommodations are available. As Ashley mentioned, if you can't make it for noon, each Zoom a Scientist session is recorded and archived. There's information on how to access the series on the website. From lake ecology to lake transportation, the Lake Champlain Transportation Company has been ferrying folks across the lake since 1826. It's an essential business anytime, but especially in the midst of a pandemic. Across the fences, Marco Ayala pulled into port at Grand Isle to get an update on how the business is faring.
We're open at the Grand Isle to Plattsburgh, New York crossing, and we're running up there 24/7. We have temporarily closed the Charlotte crossing, and as soon as we can get back there, we're going to. We had to consolidate all our resources in order to keep that link going. And so we're going 24/7, Grand Isle, Vermont to Plattsburgh, New York.
And why keeping the one to Plattsburgh from Grand Isle and vice versa, and closing the one in Charlotte?
Because there's more people in the near the northern crossing that need to get across, and there's much more truck traffic up there. The supply chain trucks cross up there. We're down over 80%. We're seeing the same people day after day, and they're thanking us. There's a good number of commuters that work at the hospital here in Burlington.
So you mentioned that riders are down. Is it your personal belief that people are taking seriously the stay-at-home recommendations?
Oh, very much. Yes. Yeah, very much so. I mean, being down 80% right there tells us, I think, says it all.
What changes have you made in the way the ferry operates in light of the COVID-19 situation?
So we're following CDC guidelines, and we are not allowing any walk-ons or bicyclists on at this time. So the vehicles, people coming on board are in their vehicle, no access to the lounge unless it's an emergency. And we're keeping the passengers and the crew separate. And then at the ticket booths, we've streamlined our ticketing process, so less interaction.
And what about your schedule? You mentioned that Plattsburgh to Grand Isle and vice versa is running 24/7. Is the schedule still the same?
The schedule is on ferries.com. We have reduced it to 2-boat service. So there's a boat during from 5:20 in the morning until 10:20 at night. There's a boat every 20 minutes, and then in the overnight there's a boat every 40 minutes. Yep, two boat service all day long, and 1 boat during the overnight.
Heather, anything else you would like to add?
That we are dedicated to provide the best possible service for those essential workers in the supply chain trucks. Hopefully this is over sooner than later, but if not, we're going to hold on, and as soon as we can, we're going to get back to the Charlotte crossing.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you to all of your crew for their efforts, because in during this situation they're essential as well.
That's awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you both. From ferries to the railroad and a bit of history. Trains were essential travel when Vermont soldiers came home from the Civil War, and the final destination for many was Brattleboro. Historian Howard Coffin takes us on a tour of the Windham County town where Vermonters came marching home again.
More Vermont Civil War soldiers came home to Brattleboro than to any other Vermont town, and more went to war from here. This is Brattleboro's busy main street. The soldiers marched along here to the train station, and coming home they marched from the train station right down this street. Pictures exist of Vermont soldiers resting along this street as they returned from 4 years of war. They were taken by George Harper Houghton, the great Civil War photographer who had a studio right in that building. The old Brattleboro Railroad station stood along these tracks close by the Connecticut rivers. The troop trains stopped here. One train that arrived during the Wilderness Campaign was filled with wounded, and it was 1/4 of a mile long. The men who had fought at Wilderness and Spotsylvania and Cold Harbor, who had fought at Gettysburg, who had fought in the Chancellorsville campaign, got off the trains here. In many cases, their loved ones were here to greet them. An unknown Brattleboro poet wrote about the departure of the 4th Vermont Regiment from Brattleboro and then its return in a poem that was published on the front page of the Brattleboro Phoenix in September of 1861. Slowly through the misty street comes the measured tramp of feet, and 1,000 forms sweep by, stepping to the roll of drum. Down the darkening street they come, And the poet concluded, "Will they tread the homeward track? God in mercy bring them back." Here by the main entrance to the Brattleboro Union High School is the Civil War Memorial, dedicated in 1906. It's here because on what are now the grounds of the school was located the largest of all Vermont Civil War encampments. More than 10,000 Vermont soldiers went to war from here, and many more than that came home here. Here is a soldier depicted all ready to go to war in perfect uniform, and here he is coming home at the end of it all battered and bandaged, but shouting with happiness because he is home back to Vermont. Rows on rows of barracks once stood on these fields, and off in the far corner was a Civil War hospital, one of 3 in Vermont. The Civil War soldiers who camped here before going to war included the men who would fight at Gettysburg in the 2nd Vermont Brigade and win that battle, I believe. The men, when they were here, wrote about the shade of the pine trees, and I'm sure those pine trees off in that direction are the children or grandchildren of those Civil War pines. When the war ended, here they got their discharges signed by their commanding officers. They treasured them, and they've been saved in so many Vermont families. And off they went home to their farms, back to the old jobs, or some to head west for new adventure.
Thank you, Howard. And once again, thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.